Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Messianic Bible Study. Again, I am Zeli, your host, and we are continuing in Genesis 25. Now, Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Midan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Asherim, Letushim, and Leomim. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanach, Abida, and Aldah. All these were the children of Keturah. Abraham gave all he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines Abraham gave gifts. And while he was still living, he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the east country. So to Babylon. These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron the son of Zohar the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried, with Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled in Be'er Lahairoi. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth: Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Abdil, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names, by their villages and their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger." Now her days to give birth were completed. Behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out all red. All his body was like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate all his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Let me take a drink really quick. Okay, so Abraham's, of course, Sarah died a couple chapters ago. And now Abraham took another wife, Keturah. She bore all of these people, but of course Abraham knows that the son of the promise is Isaac. Now this also is another episode where Abraham proves that he wasn't really the issue when it comes to the childbearing of Sarah. He was virile, apparently, because he bore how many sons? Like 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 sons from another woman after Sarah died. And so it's just really interesting. Abraham was still so, I already used the word virile, but I guess I'm going to use it again, virile, when he was, 175 years, apparently. Now, whether or not that, he actually lived to be 175, it's up for debate. People differ. Abraham is still somewhat in the era of the quasi-mythical in all of this sort of stuff at this part of Scripture. We're getting into Scripture is slowly morphing from myth to historical, and it goes, of course, from almost pure myth to, possibly being based on certain historical events and stuff, to eventually becoming more and more historical. And Abraham is still kind of in the middle there. We don't get historical events until probably Moses. Now, does that mean that Abraham never lived? A lot of scholars would say no, but I think he did. It's kind of difficult because scholars all disagree depending on whatever their own a priori principles are within their discipline. And so, like a historian, they might look at this and say, well, it's a little difficult to match with the other historical data, but historians primarily deal with written texts. And so the proof of someone's existence is whether or not they were written. And so a lot of historians, they believe Gilgamesh was alive. Maybe he was mythified in some sort of way, but they believe that he existed, that he was a king, that he probably created a small little confederacy of cities, and that then, of course, he died. And then maybe the Epic of Gilgamesh might have demonstrated something about his character, but maybe the specific events didn't actually happen. A lot of those principles are used with Abraham as well. Abraham is seen as somebody who existed in the historical discipline because we have writings about him, and we're not entirely sure when the writings were actually written down, like how far after the life of Abraham were these stories written down. But according to the historical disciplines, some of the stories about Abraham may have been embarrassing. And so the thought is that maybe these things didn't happen to a patriarch Abraham, who most Jews venerate to some degree. But probably a lot of these stories are true. I mean, it could be that these stories happened to other people and eventually they came into some sort of conglomerate person who is Abraham, who is seen as the model person. But even that, you wouldn't tell embarrassing stories about a model person. At least it just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And so the story is seen as historically true. Now, when you get into the archaeological evidence, you start, the archaeologists, according to their own principles, would probably never even imagine Abraham existed because, there's not a lot of pottery. They may say yeah, there were a bunch of nomads, sort of Bedouin style living people in those days, and maybe one of them was called Abraham, but does it have any connection? Well, we don't have any of the archaeological evidence to suggest that it did, and so they have to defer to the historians. Then when you get to ancient Near Eastern mythicists or whatever, then they might look at Abraham as just another myth. And so, the differences in the disciplines are made apparent. For our purposes, because we are Messianics, we actually believe these stories, we assume that Abraham existed, and that these stories accurately portray, more or less, his life. Now, when you look at things like, let's say, the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are some stories that are added to their text of the Bible. When you look at the Mishnah, or certain Jewish legends about Abraham's life, then there are other details that are added. And so the question is, does the Bible tell us everything we need to know about Abraham? Well, it doesn't tell us everything about Abraham. There might have been other things that happened. There might have been sort of miraculous events that have happened in his life that are just not recorded. But when it comes to Abraham's life and what we believe as believers in the Bible, this is necessarily what we believe. This biblical story. So Ishmael, Abraham's son, who is blessed by God because he is Abraham's son, then has 12 sons. And it goes to show that the children of promise are not always necessarily the first ones to have all of the blessings. It gets into Jesus' parable of Lazarus and the rich man. A lot of times God gives blessings to those who are not his chosen people. They may be adjacent to his chosen people, which is why they're being blessed, but just because they're blessed does not mean they are the chosen. So, in this generation, Ishmael has 12 sons. Isaac has 2 sons. In the next generation, Isaac's grandchildren have 12 sons. And the story continues. But Ishmael was blessed ahead of time, which is what happens oftentimes. Okay, so now we get into the next myth. These are the generations of Isaac. So we're in the myth of Isaac. It's interesting because if you read the Septuagint, when it says these are the generations, it actually says this is the book of the generations of X, of the world, or of Adam, or of Isaac, or of Abraham. And so the idea in the Septuagint was that, of course, these were sort of separate books that were supposed to be read maybe more or less chronologically, but they told different stories. And so when we read, again, generations, toldot, we're supposed to think this is a story. At least when it comes to the mythical material. Genesis is generally seen as mythical material. Okay, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padanaram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Now, we get into a little bit of, what do you call it? The predeterminism territory here, because Romans 9 is one passage that likes to be used by those who believe in predestination and that sort of thing. And then of course, the sort of free willian approach is that when Romans 9 is talking about Jacob or Esau. It's talking about groups of people as opposed to individuals. Romans 9 seems to be talking about using one person for honor and another person for dishonor and all that sort of stuff. I don't think is necessarily the case that Romans 9 is talking about salvation, but here is some evidence that he's referring to peoples as opposed to individuals. The children struggled within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" There's actually an alternative. "Why do I live?" is the alternative. So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger." So right off the bat, we're talking about 2 nations here, Jacob and Esau. And God does not indicate in any place here whether or not one of them is saved or the other is not saved. He doesn't even bring that whole argument up. What he's saying is, yeah, I have chosen one person out of these 2 people to carry on the family name. Does that mean that that person is saved versus the other? No. It doesn't mean that that person is going to heaven more than the other. What it does, like if you're actually talking about treaties in this sort of sense, and it goes back to the sons of Noah, one person is going to rule in the house of God. That is, the house of God is the covenant that God has established with man. This covenant is with the descendants of Abraham. Now, this gets transferred to Isaac. That doesn't mean that Ishmael is pushed out of the covenant, but what it does mean is Ishmael must submit to Isaac in order to remain in the covenant, to remain in the household. He's not a slave in any way. He's just lower on the hierarchy. He is a Japheth. He's not a Shem. Shem was the ruler of the house. Japheth dwelt within the house, and Ham dwelt within the house, but Canaan was a slave to his brothers. So Ishmael was seen as a Japheth, not as a Shem. Isaac was seen as the Shem, but even Isaac's descendants were divided into two groups of people. One of them was Esau, and one of them was Jacob. Jacob was going to be the ruling person within this covenantal house. Jacob is Shem. Esau, again, is another Japheth. He's going to dwell within the tents. He may even have a very specific job, and there's a tradition around Jacob and Esau where Esau has the duty of being in charge of the military of Israel. Meaning, like, he's a military man, he's mighty, he's just not inwardly bent towards study, legislation, or righteousness in that sort of capacity. So there's a tradition that Esau, when he is righteous, will act as a guard to his brother. He will surround his brother, like Israel would be the nation, and Esau would surround Israel as a hedge of protection against anybody who might come to harm them. Which is why when you read in, like, let's say, Obadiah, which is why that when you read in those sorts of books, Esau is not only reprimanded, but he's judged to the point of entire destruction because he didn't do his job of protecting his brother. And so you have the ruler of the house, and then you have the son who is chosen to be the guard, the protector of the household. But both of them are in the house, and that's the important part with this analogy. They're both part of the covenant. One is, let's say, not a child of promise, although they're twins, and God is the one who opens and closes the womb, so they're both they have both been promised. One of them is just the child of promise, and one of them is the, let's say, dweller within the tent of the other. Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples are within you, and they shall be divided. Now, it does say the older shall serve the younger. This is generally treaty terminology. It's, again, just saying that one family is going to be the kingly family, and one family is going to be the non-kingly family. And the peasants within a society generally serve the kings. Now when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out all red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. And of course, Esau is sort of means red-ish. And Jacob, or Yaakov, means heel grabber or deceiver. So Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. That means that Isaac and Rebekah were married 19 years before they had a child. And this was another instance where Isaac could have legally taken another wife, but he already knows what the precedent is on that sort of decision. Don't do it. Not only that, but Rebekah was taken from his own homeland. And so if he were to try to take another wife, he would have had to go get that person from his homeland. But he was also in a bit of a pickle because he was supposed to never leave Israel proper. So he was kind of just stuck. And his righteousness is demonstrated in that he cared for Rebekah, who is the woman of his youth. Malachi 2 reprimands the people of Israel for bringing sorrow to the altar of God, and the people of Israel say, how have we brought sorrow to the altar of God? And he says, because your women, your wives, have all come to me crying in tears because you have dealt harshly with them. And they say, how have we dealt harshly? And he says, because you have divorced them without cause. And so it is a righteous thing for Isaac to do to care for Rebekah, who is the wife of his youth. And of course he prayed and prayed, and then finally God gave him a son. He didn't have to wait as long as Abraham. He only waited 19 years. Okay. So when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. And the idea here is, at least when you look at this according to the Jewish traditions, Esau was mighty. He was a natural leader. He could get a crowd together and go and just conquer whatever he wanted. And in fact, a lot of times he is seen as not really just a hunter of game, but he did protect the encampment. He would have protected it from raiders, from larger nations, and that sort of, like all of those sorts of enemies. While Jacob was a man who dwelled in tents. Now, this doesn't mean that he was some sort of sissy boy or whatever. What it does mean is Jacob was more priestly in his demeanor. Now, there are a variety of stories in the ancient Near East where this sort of thing happened. What's his name? Mursuli, for instance. I think that was the one who was a king of the Hittites. He was originally a sickly man who was raised in the temple, and he didn't have a lot of energy to do things, but then eventually he was able to, let's see, what happened? His brother had attempted to seize the throne by killing his father, and so Mursuli, if I remember right, decided to take the throne from his brother. And so, you have this sort of struggle between the natural leader and then the more priestly, humble man. And in the end, it is the humble man that wins in that story. And it's the same in this story. Jacob is not really a sickly person, as we learn from later in the story, but Jacob is more priestly. He's, of course, young and inexperienced, but he is somebody who likes to spend his time, let's say, studying the the Bible or whatever. Although they didn't have the Bible, it was whatever religious texts that they had, or trying to learn who God is. Now, of course, that's the tradition, that's how it goes, and I tend to believe it. You have later stories where Jacob sort of has not determined that God is his Lord, which I don't think is evidence that he was not a studious person when he was younger. I think it's because we all have that moment. Like, for instance, I grew up Messianic, but up until I was like 22, I generally did what I wanted. Now, don't get me wrong. I studied the Bible. I thought I was right with God. I prayed. You know, I did I did what I thought the Bible said. The only problem is if I wanted to do something, I would use my skills of sophistry in order to make the Bible say what I wanted it to say. And eventually, at some point, when I was 21 or 23, somewhere around there, I decided to stop doing that. And when I was 21 is when I did this. And I decided to dedicate my life to the Lord, to actually make our Lord my Lord personally, and be entirely obedient to him, to humble myself and give up everything to him. And it was at that point when my life really began to change. But the point of that is that we don't, just because Jacob had not fully experienced God, had not given his life to the Lord, as we see in, let's say, the Jacob's ladder story, although he worked in large part on his own strength throughout his life until he wrestles with God, until that happens, it doesn't mean that he was never somebody who desired to know God before that. He just had not humbled himself and lowered himself below God. And the way that that works is very simple, especially when it comes to practice and morality. You can, like I said, you can read the Bible cover to cover and like verbatim do everything that it says, but not truly do what it says. Again, I could say, like, I could make the Bible say that certain things were okay, that I wanted to do. But what this really is, like when someone does that, that is themselves putting, that is them putting themselves at the top of the sort of legal hierarchy. They are the head of the law. They are the ones who determines what is right and wrong. They are taking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they're doing that for however long that they did that. And Jacob, he did that as well for however long he did that, until he wrestled with God before he met Esau. But then at that point, he humbled himself and made God the head of the law. And it was when I was 21 when I made God the head of the scriptures, when I made him the head of the law, and I made a determination that he is going to be the one that decides what is right and wrong for me. And it took Jacob a bit longer, I suppose, but he also had more time to live. So that's the difference between Jacob and Esau. More of a humble, priestly sort of fellow, and more of a rambunctious, militaristic sort of guy. That's the two of them. And Isaac, understanding that eventually the Canaanites are going to have to be conquered, he really likes Esau. He looks at Esau and he says, now this guy knows how to get a job done. He'll conquer, his descendants will conquer this land because they'll have it in them. Jacob, he might be good with teaching people what is right and wrong, but he's not a conqueror. He doesn't go out enough. He's smooth-skinned. Doesn't have much of a spine, so he's probably not going to be a good leader. So Isaac loved Esau. Now Rebekah loved Jacob for whatever reason. Now Jacob, understanding that not only is he technically the second born, but also that the person who has the power to bestow the blessing and the birthright onto his descendants, Isaac, loves Esau, then Jacob, what he does is he says, well, I want the blessing and the birthright. I want to actually be the head of this household. I don't want to submit myself to Esau. And so he says to Esau, give me your birthright. So Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? So Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, in those days, there were actually a couple things that was the right of the firstborn. The birthright it would have been considered the double portion. So the inheritance is divided up between the children, and the double portion goes to the firstborn. Now, oftentimes, this could even be just that the firstborn owns the entirety of the land. He is sort of like the landowner, while the people dwelling within it, the other sons, are the letters. That's one side of the firstborn blessing thing. The other side is actually the blessing. So the blessing is more the right to rule. So Jacob, he receives the birthright, so he's going to receive the double portion. This is why Esau says, what use is a birthright to me? He's like, I'm about to die. I don't need land. I need my life. So Jacob says, swear to me now, and so he sells him his birthright. But then it says Esau despised his birthright. And of course, the idea there is just that he sold it. It's not like he hated his birthright, though it could be the case that he didn't really like the land that they were living on. But that's the idea. Now Jacob has to figure out how to get the blessing as well. Because although he has the double portion, the right to the land, Esau still has the right to rule, because that's what the blessing is going to be. And that's what we read about in Genesis. Oh, not here yet. Later. We read about it later. Genesis 26. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands. And I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, my wife, thinking, lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. When he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah his wife, or fondling Rebekah his wife. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, she is your wife. How then could you say she is your sister? Isaac said to him, Because I thought, lest I die because of her. Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him. And the man became rich, and gained more and more, until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. So Isaac departed from there, and encamped in the valley of Gerar, and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. So he called the name of the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. From there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night, and said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servant dug a well. When Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzath his adviser, and Phicol the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me, and have sent me away from you? They said, We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, Let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early, and exchanged oaths. And Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, We have found water. He called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Okay. So of course there's a famine, and Isaac goes down to the land of the Philistines, to Gerar. But because Isaac is not supposed to leave the land of Israel, his birthright, God tells him not to go down to Egypt. So he dwelt in the land which he told him. And then God says, I will be with you and I will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father, and I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands, and in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So, two things about this particular passage. I've mentioned before how there are some people who sort of claim that the Jews do not have Israel by right, by divine right, because they say that the land was given to Abraham, not to the Jews. Well, the land was given to Abraham, and then the right to the land that was given to Abraham was then passed on to Isaac. And then, after Isaac, we'll see later, it was passed on to Jacob. And so eventually the land does pass on to the Jews. It's a really silly argument, and people don't know their Bibles if they make that argument. But even further than that, we see one of the reasons why it's good to keep the commandments laid out right here. First of all, Abraham kept the charges, the commandments, and the laws of God, not because it was good to do so, but because he loved God. Now, Isaac is doing the same thing. And he inherits the blessing of Abraham because of this. So, one of the purposes of the commandments, one of the purposes of the law, is to bless us. Now, if you think, well, this wasn't the whole law, this was back in the time of Isaac, this story would have been given to the Israelites when they received the law. You see, the same God that gave Abraham and Isaac their commandments gave Moses his commandments. And so, if you're an ancient Israelite, you're not thinking, oh, well, man, if only I lived in the days of Isaac. You would be thinking, thank God I live today where I know more than my father Isaac. Now, I know that Isaac would have been as righteous as he was then, even today, even though he would have a lot more of a weight put on him. And so he is still to be the patriarch of our people. But at the same time, it is better to live in a time where more revelation exists. And so therefore the people of Israel, they would be receiving the law with gladness. At least the righteous people of Israel would be receiving the law with gladness. Now, they would only look forward to the time of Jesus and the apostles, not because they look at the law as a burden, but because in the time of Jesus and the apostles, you have an even greater amount of revelation given. And because the righteous Israelite loves God and therefore loves his commandments and his laws, the more the revelation, the better. The more you know about the moral universe, the better. And the better you can be. And so the reason that we keep the law is not so we can be blessed, but it is because we love God. But one of the benefits of keeping the law is that you are blessed. And so when you look at people who do obey, like they're part of God's family and they obey God's commandments, they're blessed very well. Now, of course, God can do what he wants. He can bless or he cannot bless. But in the end, he has promised that he will bless. So even if there's no blessing in this life, there will be a blessing in the next life. Because that's what God wants. That's what he has decided. So Isaac settled in Gerar, because God told him to. And then the men asked him about his wife. He said, she is my sister. He did what his father Abraham did. And then, fortunately, nothing uncouth happened. Instead, somebody looked down. Abimelech looked down and saw him fondling his wife, and he said, "Aha! Like father, like son." Abimelech was around during the time of Abraham, just so we know. So he says, now Abimelech has a covenant with Abraham. They are not to harm each other. And Abraham has specifically given Abimelech sheep in order to sort of buy the land from him. If we remember a few chapters ago, Abimelech had his servants quarrel over certain wells that Abraham dug, and then Abraham said, well, he moved from one place to another just like Isaac, but then when Abimelech came over, and he was sort of begging Abraham to make a covenant with him, Abraham made part of the stipulation of the covenant that his wells are his wells, and so Abimelech agrees. And so the issue here, Abimelech knows Isaac. He knows that this is Abraham's son. He knows that the covenant extends to Isaac. He has a lot of this property by right because his father bought it. But in the end, Abimelech breaks his covenant. So Isaac becomes rich, he is blessed and becomes wealthy, he has possessions and all that sort of stuff. And and the Philistines envied him. And then it says the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. So not only did did they not keep the covenant with Isaac, but they even broke the covenant with Abraham. And so Abimelech says to Isaac, "Get away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines, Abimelech, and the people of Gerar had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave him the names that his father had given them. But then the same old story happens. Isaac's servants, they dig a well, herdsmen of Gerar quarrel over it, and then Isaac digs another well, the servants of Abimelech quarrel over it, then Isaac finally digs a well, and the servants of Abimelech do not quarrel over it. And then God visits him. "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring and your servant for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built there an altar, and then his servants dug a well. And then finally Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzath his advisor and Phicol the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to see me, considering that you hate me?" And they said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you." So he said, "Let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace." Right. "You are now the blessed of the Lord." And so Isaac made a feast for them. They ate and drank, and in the morning they rose early and exchanged their oaths. And Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. And then, of course, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." Now, what Isaac is doing here is, again, just like Abraham his father did, he's digging wells as a form of conquest. He's saying, "I dug this well, nobody owns this land, I'm putting my flag in the ground, this belongs to Isaac and Abraham." And then, of course, some of the other people, they come over and they're like, no, that's our will. It's on our land. And then Isaac's like, you don't own this land. And they say, we do now. And so Isaac leaves, and he goes finds another spot, digs a well, sticks a flag in the ground, and then the same people come over and they say, oh no, this is also our land. And so Isaac leaves again, digs a well, sticks his flag in the ground, and nobody comes and tries to take it. And then finally these people come and they make a covenant with him. And so this is what he's doing. He's not just digging wells for his own security, but wells were the center of cities. He's digging a well and laying the foundation to build a city there that he, his family, his descendants will rule over. And so that's the whole point of the story. When the Israelites are about to conquer the land, they're not saying we are foreigners coming to overthrow the residents who have a right to this land, but they're saying this land was promised to our fathers by the God of the universe who owns the land, and he has sent us as the repo men to kick you out because you have not been paying rent. And so this happened to some degree in Abraham and Isaac's day when God was blessing them and multiplying them and allowing them to dig these wells and claim certain parts of the land by right in their day. But then eventually their children are going to come and actually take the land. Okay. Now we get to Genesis 27. So this is the time where Jacob takes the second part of what it is to be a firstborn. So when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that they could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it in, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you may bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, bring them to me." So he went and took them and brought them to his brother, or to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went in to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, and your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near to me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, and blessed him, and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food, and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau." Then Isaac trembled very violently, and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed." As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing." Then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Behold, I have made him lord over you, and all of his brothers I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father." And Isaac lifted up his voice and wept. Or Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to him, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while, until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?" Okay. So Isaac is old, and he becomes dim of sight. And he's still thinking about blessing Esau, because again, Isaac thinks that Esau is really the rightful heir to all of this kingdom that Isaac is going to have. He's the leader. He gets things done. And therefore, when he sends him on his way to go hunt some game, he knows that he's going to get it, because he's a doer. And so he's going to bless Esau and give him the right to rule over his brothers. Now, the thing about these blessings, which is really interesting, is the people giving the blessings, receiving the blessings, and learning about these blessings Understand these to be divine words that are being bestowed upon somebody, and they cannot be revoked. Why else, if he says the blessing, will he not just say, oh, well, that was a mistake, cancel those words, and I will transfer them to you? No, but he said the blessing, and therefore they stand. He doesn't have the power to rescind them, which is an interesting thing, to say the least. And so Rebecca tells Jacob, you need to take this blessing, because I know, I've been told by God that you are going to be the ruler of the house. Now, I've told I've told Isaac this, but he won't listen to me. And so you need to take it. And so Jacob is, of course, concerned, and then he thinks he's going to get a curse. But of course, Rebecca, because curses mean something. If you get a curse, it's a bad thing. Especially if you're cursed by somebody who God says, whoever you curse, I will curse. And so a curse from Isaac is a curse from God. And a blessing from Isaac is a blessing from God. But Jacob acquiesces, and they hatch the scheme. The problem is Jacob is a smooth man, Esau is a hairy man. And so Rebecca she slaughters this kid, and then takes the wool from this kid and just attaches it all over Jacob, which is astonishing because apparently Esau was pretty hairy. If you can take wool and just put it in like patches all over your son, and you're like, well, that's Esau passing. He passes as Esau, and that's crazy. So when he went in to his father and said, my father, and he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Now sit up and eat my game, that your soul may bless me. Now, Isaac, he is suspicious now. And there's a reason. Because look at how Esau responds to this. He said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game that you may bless me. Much more concise. Jacob is, Jacob says, I have done as you have told me. Now sit up and eat my game that your soul may bless me. It's a bit more, well, first it's a bit more deferential to his father. I have obeyed you, a declaration of obedience. And he's asking him to, not only asking him to bless him, but he's saying, let your soul bless me. So let this blessing come from God himself, who's working through you. So Isaac, he is a little suspicious already. So he says, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? Jacob answers, because the Lord your God granted me success. Now this makes Isaac even more suspicious. Esau would not give credit to God for his own work. So Isaac says to Jacob, okay, come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob comes near to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice. Like, this guy talks like Jacob, but his hands are the hands of Esau. So this is Esau. Now, now what Isaac is thinking now is, okay, this is Esau. Maybe Esau, in this more solemn place, is actually stepping up to bat when it comes to holiness. maybe when it comes to the important matters, he actually will be deferential to me and to God. He's not normally like that, but maybe he will now. And so the good qualities of Jacob, that he is deferential to God, he's deferential to his parents, those good qualities he's now recognizing in Esau. And so in Isaac's mind, he's like, this is great. Esau, the son that I love the most, who goes out and gets things done, and normally he's a little brash, normally he's a little vulgar, but right now when it really counts, he actually takes a step into holiness so that he can sort of dwell in the sacredness of this moment. That's something that Jacob would do, but now Esau's doing. So I get the best of both worlds here. So Isaac is understandably pretty happy, but still a little suspicious because like that doesn't just happen right away. So he brings him near, and then his father Isaac said, "Come near and kiss me, my son." Now up to this point, Isaac is still a little suspicious, but Isaac smells the smell of his garments, and he blesses him. The importance of the smelling of his garments is that traditionally the nose, the scent, is seen as prophetic. Like if somebody is sort of smelling another person, it's like they are taking in the spirit and then able to like if they're a prophet like Isaac is, then they're able to understand the spirit and push it outwards again to the person in verbal form and prophesy over them. And so this isn't just a blessing. Again, none of these people here think of this as just words, but they think of this as coming from God, and Isaac, as the emissary of God in the earth at this point, is prophesying over this person whom he thinks is Esau. And Isaac is ecstatic because his favorite son now is finally showing faithfulness to God. So he says, "The smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." So what is happening here is Isaac is taking the blessing that was given to Abraham and then given to Isaac and passing it down to Jacob. Jacob has received the birthright, and now he has received the blessing. He has received the double portion, the ownership of the tents, of the land, the sort of political rule, but now he's also receiving the spiritual rule, the right to lead the people of God. And just because it was got by deceit does not mean that the prophecy was any less potent. And so I hear preachers like talk about this, where they say Jacob should have just let it go. He shouldn't have deceived because God was going to bless him. Which, yeah, maybe, could have been. But this blessing was a big deal. And if Jacob was not a usurper now, he was going to be a usurper later. If Esau received that blessing, and then Jacob came in later and said, "Oh, by the way, actually that blessing was supposed to be for me," he would have been no different than any of the vast multitude of usurping kings who come in and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm actually the real king here." In the eyes of all the people around him, it would have still been a sin. And so he would have been a usurper now, or he would have been a usurper later. This was a critical moment. But what we also see is Jacob is sort of taking on the mantle in the hands of Esau. Jacob, who dwells in tents, is studious, is generally a quiet person, has taken the initiative. He has decided to push his way into the place of blessing. And so this is also good. Of course, deceit is not good, and it would have been better if it would have been done a different way, but the blessing was important for Jacob to take. And he would have been a usurper now or later. It would have just been a bit more complicated later. And also, Jacob's character is beginning to shift. He's becoming more like his brother Esau, more like the sort of ideal that Isaac was just now attempting to bless, the combination of Esau and Jacob. But then Esau comes home. And so he comes and says to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." So his father Isaac is like, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm your son, your firstborn Esau." Then Isaac trembles very violently. So there are some traditions that say that Isaac actually knew about this, that the prophecy was like something that he was aware of. But this suggests otherwise. Isaac trembled very violently because he didn't know that that was Jacob. He thought he was blessing an Isaac or an Esau that had become more righteous. And so he says, "Who is that then that I ate from their game and I blessed him, and he shall be blessed, because I can't rescind such a blessing." And Esau cries out, and he begins to beg his father for a blessing. And then Isaac says, he does give him a blessing, and he says, which is quite a blessing, "Away from the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Now, this blessing traditionally is actually seen as sort of like a contingency blessing. We just read that Jacob is now the ruler of the household. Cursed is everyone who curses him, blessed is everyone who blesses him. He is the Lord of his brothers. Now, Esau, having Jacob as his Lord, is now blessed by saying that, yes, your brother will rule over you, but when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now, the word restless here, of course, it means restless, but like, you have to go and think about at what points in a national or in a nation's history do they become restless? And you could say, well, many points, but specifically when the ruling class is not righteous, when justice is not served, when people are mistreated. So the way that the tradition goes is when Esau grows restless, he will become the ruler. He will break the yoke of Jacob, which sort of means like stepping into Jacob's role. But how the tradition goes is when Jacob is wicked, Esau grows restless and begins to rule. When Jacob becomes righteous again, then they assert their rule again. And so there's sort of like Esau's service of his brother is contingent on his brother's righteousness. And that's the blessing that Isaac gives him. Now, of course, like for Esau, who's kind of the king of the jungle here, it's a terrible blessing. He's like, my entire existence, my service, my rule is all dependent on my brother. It's terrible. according to him. But this was necessary because God had already decided that Esau would serve Jacob. And so Isaac is to some degree putting a caveat on that, on the promise of God, saying, yeah, you will serve him, but only if he's being righteous. If he's not being righteous, then he will serve you. And so Esau promises to kill Jacob before he has any children, and therefore the blessing will never take effect. And if the blessing doesn't take effect, then that means that Isaac can bless Esau. So Rebekah sends Jacob away. Now I'm just going to read a little bit of the next chapter because of this part. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham." Thus Isaac sent Jacob away. Now, if you're Esau and you're begging your father to give you a blessing, and Isaac was like, "I don't know what else to give you. I'm sorry, I already gave him everything. I'll give you this little thing." And then he calls in your brother again and gives him more blessings, things that were not necessarily part of the first blessing. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of people. That wasn't part of the original blessings. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. There wasn't a particular set of land that was given to Jacob before. And so Esau, seeing that Isaac had blessed Jacob, decided to take another wife. So it wasn't really that there was no blessing left to give, but I think Isaac realized what had happened and that God had intended to bless Jacob, and so he acquiesced to God's choice. Finally, it just took however many years. Actually, I think I figured it out one time, but Jacob is like 60 years old when he leaves his father's house, and so it only took him 60 years to figure it out. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this study. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, let me know. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.